Well, g'day Wagga. Thank you all for coming out tonight. We really appreciate it on your Friday night, and a big weekend happening this weekend too. And of course, very important that we hear from all the candidates tonight, or the 5 out of the 7 that are here with us on some of the issues that are facing town. Now, my name is Chris Rowe. I'm the editor of Region Riverina, a digital news platform, and I just want to start by acknowledging that we are on Wiradjuri land and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging, and also acknowledge any First Nations people here in the room as well. Now, Region Riverina is a very proud corporate member of the Committee for Wagga, who of course are very much behind this event. We're working with the streaming guys tonight to put out the live stream, and I'm sure you know some of the good work that Committee for Wagga do around the place. And thank you to Scott and the executive and all the team from Committee for Wagga for putting this on for us tonight. We really appreciate it. And here at the RSL Club as well. And those of you who are watching us online, you are able to participate through the night. So if you want to make some comments on the stream, there are several social media streams. If you make comments or questions, or you put them on the live stream that the streaming guys are doing for us, we'll keep an eye over that. And we probably won't be able to get to everything, but we will try and include some of those questions later on in the night. Well, I'll hand you over now to the moderator of tonight's conversation, Region Media's Group Editor, Genevieve Jacobs.
And I'll get you to take your notes with you, please. Yeah, thank you. Look, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Thank you very much for the introduction, Chris. If there is an election in the offing, it must be debate time. So thanks to the Committee for Wagga for organising a cracker. As Chris said, we're live streaming this on Region Riverina, and so you can go back and view that. It'll be, I said to Dr. Joe, here for eternity. So he expressed some doubt about that. He wondered whether perhaps there might be an end to the debate being online. But if you'd like to recommend that to your friends and anyone who's not able to watch it live, then it's a terrific way to get an insight into not only the candidates' policies but also how they perform, and hopefully under a bit of pressure. I want to also acknowledge the input not only of the Committee for Wagga but the Wagga Residents and Ratepayers Association. As Chris said, I'm Genevieve Jacobs, Group Editor for Region Media, including Region Riverina. I'm a long-time past ABC presenter on ABC Canberra, but married to a farmer just up the road at Wallenbean. My career started with the Cootamundra Herald, and I was born and bred in Quandialla. So this is a debate that I relish. We've got 5 candidates with us: sitting member independent Dr Joe McGurr, Labor candidate Kerryn Foley, Julia Ham for the Liberals, Adriana Benjamin for the Nationals, and Ray Goodlass running for the Greens. I'm about to give them 2 minutes, and I will be timing it. Those 15 years on Talkback Radio mean I'm very happy to be rude and pull people up. So they've all been told 2 minutes each for their elevator pitch. And then I'll spend about half an hour or so questioning them. We'll incorporate questions from the Committee for Wagga and the Ratepayers Association. As Chris said, I don't promise to get to every single question individually, and nor will every candidate necessarily get to answer every single question, but we're going to try to cover all the territory. Now, as the sitting member, Dr Joe, your elevator pitch time starts now.
Thank you, Genevieve, and welcome to everybody. As an independent member of Parliament, I work with all sides of politics to achieve a positive outcome for our community. I'm not beholden to a political party. Integrity is important to me, and it's important to the community that rightly expects a high standard from their political leaders. And that's why I've worked with my fellow independents in Parliament on greater public scrutiny and anti-corruption standards for politicians. As an independent, I listen to the community so I can take their concerns directly to government. I was the first Member of Parliament to raise concerns over HumeLink, the route, the compensation, the consultation. And we have seen progress, but there's more to do. And I've been heartened to see the other parties and candidates join me in calls for a public inquiry into undergrounding the HumeLink. At this election, we face key issues as a state and an electorate. We need to tackle the rising cost of living. We need more houses so we can provide for our vulnerable, create living opportunities and attract the workers we need, such as teachers for our schools. We need a standalone rural health department and a minister to address our rural health challenges. We will not fix rural health with solutions from Sydney. The answers are right here in our regions. We need the funding for safer roads. We also need a truly independent Agriculture Commissioner to help resolve land use conflict, and we need better feral animal control. And we need to keep our city livable and safe, and that should mean a duplicated Gobba Bridge, an inland rail that will not wreck our city, and crime prevention resources. We also need cashless gaming to help problem gamblers and stop criminal money laundering. And we need a fair transition to achieve this for rural venues. These are some, but not all, of the challenges we face. We can meet these challenges with an independent voice and leadership to act on community concerns. And I can be that independent voice and leadership for you.
Gee, he's not too bad. 1 minute 56. Well done. Thank you, Dr. Joe. Karen Foley, to you next.
I too would like to pay my respects to the Wiradjuri people, custodians of the land. And I hope that you might ask a question about the voice, because I support the voice. I never wanted to be a politician. I always said that it doesn't matter what you do as a politician, you're always wrong, and I don't like being wrong. I've had a pretty interesting life. I've done a lot of paid and unpaid roles. I have worked as run a small business, and I've done a lot of volunteer work, and currently I work as a counsellor and a mediator in a non-government organisation. And in my daily work, I work for the vulnerable and the disadvantaged. So I kind of do that one person at a time. And I kind of thought that if I stood for Parliament, I might be able to advocate that for them on a wider scale. I've done quite a bit of travelling in my life, and in terms of travelling all over the world, I've kind of come to the conclusion that people are the same all over. People are mainly trying to live, work, raise a family, look after the elderly, look after the poor and disadvantaged in their community. And the role of government is to spend our taxes wisely and to look after the areas of health, education, housing, affordable housing, housing for first home buyers. Housing has become a commodity, not a necessity.
I'm going to pull you up there, Karen. That's 2 minutes. Thank you. Julia Ham, to you next.
Hello everyone, I'm Julia Ham. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the area, the Wiradjuri people, and also the Narrabri people from up in the Snorri Valleys. I'm a teacher, small business owner, counsellor and a farmer. And I am just absolutely delighted to be here tonight. I thank you all for coming, and I'm delighted to be the Liberal candidate for Wagga. The reason I'm delighted to be the Liberal candidate for Wagga is because Liberals work for Wagga. They have done before and they will do again. And I'm particularly excited to be able to announce, because I did run before, that since that time we have delivered the hospital, the car park, the Tumut Hospital, the cycling, the multi-purpose cycling out of Polygalana, the conservatorium, Estella Primary School. All these things have made Wagga bigger and better. So tonight is not about personalities. Tonight is about how we can do better for Wagga. And in my role as a counsellor and in my role at advocating for everything I have...
Oh. Hang on. What have we got?
Testing 1, 2.
No, we've got another mic for you.
Sorry,
You're okay?
that mic sounds terrible.
There we go. I haven't penalised you for the time, Julia. I've just started the stopwatch again. Off you go.
Thank you. I'll go back to, this is not about personalities. This is about getting what is best for Wagga. And when I look at the Perrottet government and the strong economic plan he's got going forward, I have a lot of faith. I have a lot of faith that he can deliver, and that the Liberal government, coalition government, can deliver. But I also have got some concerns. And those concerns is that the voice to the Parliament has not been loud, and that we need to have a loud voice directly to Parliament. And the reason I know this is because of the past history with the Liberals in Wagga. So when I talk about when I talk about a plan, the main thing I'm running for is the Gobba Bridge. So I looked to the transport plan. There was no date. There is no date even for a feasibility study. So I'm here tonight to tell you I want to be the woman to take the plan to the man to say amend that plan and we want a date for our bridge.
Okay, I'll pull you up there, Julia. Thank you very much. Ray Goodlass, I'm going to you next.
Thank you. I too would like to acknowledge the Wiradjuri people as the traditional custodians of the land on which we're meeting. Pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land, and sovereignty has never been ceded. Now, 2 minutes, basically just the headlines or titles of my key issues. First of all, the environment and climate change. Save endangered species and protect threatened ecosystems, tackling and surviving the climate crisis. Frontline public servants such as nurses, midwives, teachers, AMBOs and other first responders, much better pay and working conditions, and scrap the public sector wage cap. That leads me into cost of living and housing crisis. We make housing affordable and bring electricity back into state hands. Next headline is problem gambling. And I don't really support cashless gaming cards because that seems like gamble now and pay later. It's another pay later scheme. And I think the ceiling will fall in when I say take pokies out of pubs and clubs. See, the ceiling is falling in there. Though you think this is a federal issue, according to the media, truth, treaty and voice is a state issue as well, and we must have an Indigenous voice to state parliament. And finally, infrastructure. Duplicate the Gobba Bridge, reroute the inland rail around population centres such as Wagga, and bypass Edward Street by building a state highway bypass.
Okay, well done. Thanks, Ray. And Andriana, to you last.
Thanks, Genevieve. Thank you to everyone that's attended tonight. It's really great to be here amongst all you. I'm Andriana Benjamin. I am the Nats candidate for Wagga Wagga, and I'm proud to be a national candidate. I'm 33 years old, and I grew up in Tumut most of my life. I'm the co-CEO of Health Clinics Australia, which is across 3 states. Myself as a young person, I grew up in Tumut knowing the fact that I had great opportunities in regional New South Wales to achieve what I wanted to and to achieve what we need to better our communities. My lifestyle in regional New South Wales has been extremely amazing, and I want to see our electorate grow to be what it can be, and there is so much potential across this whole electorate. I myself, the Nationals candidate, was also a councillor for Snowy Valleys Council in the last election. That particular role showed me exactly what I can do for my community and what the Nationals in government did for my community in that part of our electorate. It was the Nationals in the bushfires that were on the ground, that were there, Steph Cook, Wes Fang, Dr Joe, that achieved so much, and John Barilaro, our former Deputy Premier, that achieved so much, and they came tirelessly all the time to make sure we were okay and delivered what we needed across the region. That's why I chose to be the Nationals, to be part of the Nationals Party, because they are the ones that care about regional New South Wales, they are the ones that deliver, and they are the ones that you can actually contact and get the job done. I myself am a young person in our community that is a role model to the other younger people in our community also. And I, for one, think that Parliament should have younger representation. We are full of energy. I've got a background of great leadership, but also someone that can actually be a go-getter and get things done.
And you've also come to the end of your time. Thanks, Andriana. Okay, now let's go to the questions from here at the lectern. And please, if you're listening, then do text those questions in or send them in via Facebook. They'll come to me as well. I'm going to start with the cost of living, which is a huge pressure for everyone and with particular effect on housing too here in Wagga. And Andriana, I might have cut you off then, but I'm going to go to you first. There is a 1% rental vacancy in Wagga. We have huge economic activity throughout the Riverina and in the city in particular, including Transgrid on the way. At the same time, a skills shortage that is dire, but nowhere for anyone to live. What's the answer?
I think we really need to be working really closely with council to be able to release land to people to actually, build properties on. There's a whole problem in the whole state. There's been a problem since we've had COVID, and probably a little bit. I think it's about 3 years now that we've had a major problem. I think the COVID hasn't helped in regards to what we're facing at the moment and also interest rates, but I think it comes back down to working very closely with your councils with our councils to actually release land. And for myself as a young person, getting out there and purchasing properties and helping the region thrive is really important. And when I see someone, of young nature getting out there and buying their first home, it's great. But the main thing is getting land on the ground and being able to build your own homes. There is a bit of a crisis, but it's across the whole electorate. So I'm happy to fight where we can to ensure that we can bring the cost of living down and we can get some more lands across the electorate to actually be able to build, for the younger generations to build their homes, because they're finding it really difficult. And I'm hearing it on the ground every single day. And it's been not just these last, few years that we've had a pandemic, it's been decades. So I think there's a major issue, and I'm happy to fight where we can to ensure that we can actually get across this and really get some land. Like we don't have enough.
Okay, let's explore how that might work, because this is not news for the current government, for the Perrottet government. This is a multi-term government. Julia Ham, I'm going to go on to you on this. There are some potential big answers here. There's the Rowan Village, for example, which would be bigger than Griffith when completed, but the approvals process is agonisingly slow. We've had a lot of promises from this state government over many years now about streamlining it to no apparent effect. So take me through what would change for Wagga under a re-elected Perrottet government.
Well, certainly, personally, if I was elected as the Member of Parliament, I'd be going straight to that planning department, because as a councillor, I just find that it is so frustratingly slow. And when you talk of have the council do this, the council would love to do lots of things, but they are, as you indicated, very much hamstrung by the planning department. I agree. I think work needs to be done in that area.
Right. Well, you could have a special activation precinct, couldn't you? Would you promise that? For housing?
For housing? I'd love to promise that. Yes, absolutely. 6 weeks turnaround and then you've got your land through a DA? That would be fantastic.
Wonder if there'd be any problems with that, but let's move on. Dr. Joe, I'm going to go to you on the Tollern Renewal Project. I know that's something you're enthusiastic about, the plan to build smaller and more diverse housing types on a lot of that old public housing stock. Is there a guarantee of public housing in that project? Is that a way to provide affordable housing to do something about the growing homelessness problems?
Thanks, Genevieve. The Tollern Renewal Project is something I've pushed with the government since I was elected, because I could tell that was urgently needed, and I was quite gratified that the government approved that in November last year, and I was delighted to be able to announce that. That will substantially increase social and affordable housing, but it will also substantially increase private housing, and it will also change the nature and layout of that suburb, which I think will have enormous advantages for the families living in that suburb. It's the first in regional New South Wales. It's the sort of model that's worked in southwest Sydney. It will increase housing and it will deliver benefits for the community. But can I come to the point you've just raised about the Special Activation Precinct? And I announced this at the start of the week, that I think the Department of Planning does need to do more to assist councils. Councils have a real issue with staffing at the moment, getting skilled planners for their developments. The government has said, in response to the Regional Housing Task Force inquiry, that they would assist councils. But I think clearly more needs to be done. And I think the Department of Planning could actually institute a process similar, as I said, to the Special Activation Precinct, where the approval processes are taken care of ahead of time, and that would also address an issue to do with biodiversity offsets, which is plaguing developments at the moment.
And Dr. Joe, you don't see any difficulties with, say, a 6 to 8 week turnaround for approvals? I mean, you know, we've had issues in this electorate before over trust and transparency. Isn't that the kind of situation that could be ripe for exploitation?
Clearly we need to guard against that, but the process that the Special Activation Precinct followed here in Wagga, which was led by Department of Planning, Regional New South Wales, that was a thorough process that set the parameters in place by which developments could take place. And they've guaranteed, I think, a 10-week turnaround, provided the developments are complying. Now, the key is to get the work done right at the start, correctly at the start, to make sure that the parameters are right. But once you've done that, that will very much speed up the approval process. And developers tell me that that's what's plaguing them at the moment, that's what's holding back constraint, that's what's constraining supply. And I think this is a concrete way we could address that.
Ray Goodlass, to you on this. I mean, it's not as if we don't have land for development. There's plenty of land around South Wagga. You could develop an enormous amount of housing there. How do you feel about that? What's the opportunity for you?
Well, first of all, you've got to make sure it isn't flood prone.
Good point.
That's a really important issue, and if the past year has taught us anything, it's to be aware of the dangers of flooding. I think, I think we've got to stop tinkering around the edges and admit that we've got a major housing crisis on our hands, and we need an entire whole of government approach, such as we had after the Second World War, when, you know, hundreds of thousands of houses were built. And we need to adopt such an attitude. There is a crisis here, and we need a whole of government approach to solve it, including planning and including working with developers and builders and suppliers and so forth. We just can't tinker around the edges. Where
are you going to put the houses, though? Specifically here in Wagga, where should that development take place?
Well, where should the development take place? Well, as I said, not flood-prone areas, and not preferably prime farming land either, or prime precious environmental ecosystems. So, you know, any other area that doesn't fall into one of those categories.
All right, anything but. Karen Foley, I'm going to go to you on this. Housing is always a very complex picture. One of the solutions that's often proposed is build to rent. Chris Minns says that Labor will trial build to rent in Nowra aimed at alleviating the strain. They're going to put 30% of that aside for affordable or social housing. The cost is around about $30 million. Would you commit to a similar project for Wagga?
I think that's starting off as a pilot, and I think as well it's starting off as a pilot because of what happened with the bushfires down the south coast and the amount of housing stress that they're experiencing there. But I agree, there is housing stress. Housing, it is a lack of planning. The housing crisis didn't happen overnight. So the plans in the Fresh Start plan, which you can find on the website, is to remove and reduce stamp duty, planning for social housing, the build-to-rent projects, merging housing agencies into one, merging the Land Corporation, the Aboriginal Housing and DCJ Housing into one to reduce administration costs, a 5-year funding for the housing agencies that have been helping our people survive. We are talking here about, you know, releasing land and doing those kind of things, but we're talking here as well about the fact that people are sleeping in their cars and pitching their tents in Wilkes Park. They also want to help renters and stop unfair evictions. And this was a massive problem following the housing squeeze, and particularly I know my sister lived in Tathra when the houses burnt down she was put out of her house because they wanted to get a higher rent. So that's extremely problematic.
Yeah, growing rent pressures are certainly a problem in any city where there's a huge amount of economic development. So what we've got here is maybe the possibility of a special activation precinct type project for housing in particular, perhaps the Tollin Park renewal, more development. Let's take care that we don't do it on flood-prone land, and also let's help councils with the approvals process. There's some interesting converging viewpoints there and some interesting differences on how that might actually take place. Certainly one of those wicked problems. Transport and access then begins to come into the picture, and I want to move on to transport, very much part of the growing pains for the region. We've probably got three wicked problems rolled into one. The Gobba Bridge is an enormous priority, the duplication. Add to that exactly where that inland rail line goes, and then the possibility of a heavy vehicle bypass for the Sturt Highway. Dr Jo, for you, Perce, the state government transport plans commit to nothing more really than a feasibility plan for duplicating the Gobba Bridge, and there's not even really a guarantee on that. Now, I mean, surely that's because of the cost, isn't it? The New South Wales government just doesn't want to stump up billions for that 2.5 kilometres or so of infrastructure, or they'd have got it done already.
Look, that's right, Genevieve, and I can tell you it was a struggle just to get the concept of the duplication into the transport plan. It took a lot of lobbying on my part directly to the Minister to say simply, you cannot have a transport plan for Wagga without considering the duplication of the Gobba Bridge. Full stop, end of story. And the Minister, to his credit, agreed with that, and as a result of that, they have agreed to start the work on the feasibility of that project. As you said, we're talking about a multi-billion-dollar project, and so it does need the preparatory work done. Look, it was something that I raised with the Premier when he visited last year, and we were right in the midst of the catastrophic 3-hour trips across the Gobba in the midst of the floods. And subsequently to that, I made sure that the Department Transport for New South Wales, I met with them with Council and made sure that they had started work on that feasibility study and on the necessary preliminary work. And that needs to be completed in the next year or two, so we know what the options are and we know how much this is going to cost. A project of this size, as I say, $500 million perhaps, is going to require a commitment from the government, clearly, and we need to start work on that. It's something that I have been very conscious about lobbying for, and I will continue to lobby for that. You've mentioned inland rail, and that is a huge issue for this community. I do want to point out that it is a federal initiative, and I do want to point out that the discussions on this, as far as I can see, started back in 2006, planning 2010, final decisions made 2016, 17, 18. At no point was a bypass of Wagga ever considered in that. The options were for it to go via Shepparton or Wagga, and the Wagga City Council quite rightly lobbied to have it here because it will be of enormous benefit to our community. We can see that with the Special Activation Precinct and the Intermodal Hub. However, we are now faced with the fact that the business case on that line was only ever done on that rail coming through Wagga. That was only ever done on that. The environmental impact statement is now being considered by the New South Wales Government, and there are very real concerns in this community about the Edmondson Street Bridge, the impact for houses and the impact on traffic at level crossings. And I have already met with the Departments of Planning and Transport to highlight those issues and to make sure that they get a proper analysis done of the impacts of those, because I don't actually believe that the environmental impact statement prepared by Inland Rail adequately considers any of those issues. And if they can't be addressed, we'll have to go back to the federal government and say, guys, we need a bypass of this, because we cannot, with our city growing the way it is, tolerate large numbers of trains coming through, ridiculous constructions on the Edmondson Street Bridge, and disruptions to traffic through those level crossings.
Okay, look, I'm going to go back to the Gobba Bridge for the moment. Julia Ham, to you. And which choice is it, though, in the meantime? The feasibility study isn't done. Something needs to happen, and there's a couple of different proposals. More traffic lights, a graded underpass. What are you supporting as a candidate for the current government, and what change would you bring about to this long-running problem if the current government gets another go?
So, Genevieve, when I decided to stand as a candidate, I went to the Liberal Party and said, well, I want to stand. on this one condition, is that I can get a commitment about the duplication of the Gobba Bridge. It took a week, and then the Liberal Party came back and said, you have that commitment. So that is, should you decide to vote Liberal and the Liberal government gets in, that is the commitment that we will start on the duplication of the bridge.
When, though? When?
As soon as we're in. That is my commitment.
Okay, you've heard it here first.
And that is the only way I stood.
Okay, well, let's see what happens, but that's an interesting one to be playing with. Karen Foley, an absolute majority of locals want to get the bridge done, and we know that from the Committee for Wagga survey, which showed a huge majority of people think that this is an urgent priority. The community is constantly being told that it all costs too much. So if the Liberals are going to build it the very second Julia Ham gets elected...
They've got to scope it.
Okay. Give it a week or two, a couple of months maybe, and the Gobba Bridge will be underway. But Karen, what promises would a newly elected Minns government be prepared to make? And is the Gobba Bridge your top priority for transport and access in this region?
I think that since taking on this role as a candidate, a lot of people have come to tell me about what they want. And I'll get one email of people saying what they want, and the next email will be saying other people want something the complete opposite. In terms of good government has to prioritise on according to need. Government has to determine those things and make hard decisions. I really don't know, because I haven't spoken to Chris Minns about what the commitment would be for the Gobba Bridge. But I think that that good government makes decisions and prioritises on the basis of need, and that would be the wisest way to spend money.
Okay, so that's not a commitment from Labor to duplicate the Gobba Bridge at this stage? I'm reading that accurately?
I'd have to find out about that.
Okay. Andriana, the inland rail proposal comes into this too, because as Dr Joe said, bringing that train line through the middle of town will cost a bomb. It'll cost even more to swing it around town. The bridge itself costs billions. Goodness knows what a Sturt Highway bypass would cost. Which is the most important priority for you for the Nats?
Gobba Bridge. I've been out in the community listening and really hearing loud and clear that there's a massive issue, especially with the growth that's happening across that side of the of Wagga Wagga. It's very loud and clear that the Gobba Bridge needs to be duplicated, and it's an honour to work with Sam Farraway, the Minister, to be able to get that business case up and going. So I've spoken to the DP's office as well, and I myself, if we are elected, I will fight to make sure we get that business case funding and we can actually get things moving, because we can't keep it going for much longer. It's getting to a point where a lot of people are getting really frustrated with the delays on that particular bridge. I've heard loud and clear from both sides of other stakeholders as well, and I understand where they're coming from, but I think we need to move forward and we need to get the funding for the actual business case as soon as possible, and we need to have action. And I think it's been spoken about for too many years now, and it's getting to a point where we're growing rapidly and it's not good enough what's happening right now. So I'll definitely be fighting for getting that funding and moving forward and getting things done.
Okay, so I'm reading a lot of agreement about the Gobba Bridge, and that's not surprising. Diverse opinions about how and when that will get done. Ray Goodlace, I want to come to you, though, on this inland rail proposal. How are you feeling about, say, 8 lots of 3.5k double-stacked trains coming through, just up the top of Bayliss Street every day, bringing with them plenty of economic opportunity for the Riverina?
Look, there is a potential economic opportunity for Riverina, yes, but not coming through the centre of Wagga, where the inland railway will be a monumental health hazard. And, it really needs to be routed around Wagga, away from population centres, so people are not choking on the fumes, essentially. And
who's going to pay for that?
By the way, I haven't heard anything about electrifying the line. It all seems to be diesel-powered, which is sort of, early 20th or even late 19th century thinking. So we need to be electrifying a line around Wagga. And yes,
so we're going to have an electric... freight train. Okay, I'm just struggling with the picture of how this is all going to work. Go.
But I hate to tell you, but all the Sydney trains run on electricity.
But they're not covering. They're not carrying hundreds of tons of.
The Melbourne trams run on electricity.
All right.
You can run electric freight trains, and it's backward thinking to think that we can't do that. You know, we've got to stop tinkering around. I was thinking earlier what we're all so keen to duplicate the Gobba Bridge, which we are, because let's face it, the Gobba Bridge, as designed and built, was a monumental planning mistake, given the development of the northern suburbs, and we're continuing to pile one disaster on top of another. And if we have these huge diesel-powered trains, they're massively injurious to health and the noise and all the rest of it, and the problems with level crossings and all the rest of it. Which brings me to cars. We've still got our brains firmly fixed in everybody having their own precious little or big car. And we need to get seriously thinking about more public transport. And I'll have electric buses, and I'll go even one stage further. I think Wagga really needs some major tram routes.
Okay, you heard it here first. Trams for Wagga and an entire electric freight system. Let's see how that one goes down with state government. I want to move on to healthcare, and again, a huge problem. Everything folds into one, doesn't it? Because we've got housing, access and cost of living. That hugely impacts our access to services, the ability to attract healthcare staff to regional areas. And I think you get this escalating scale of problems for regional residents. You know, you break your wrist in Tumut, you have to go and get it set in Wagga. You need open heart surgery in Wagga, you'll have to go to Sydney. Julia Ham, why can't we attract the specialists we urgently need? How could we fix it?
Wagga is doing fairly well with the specialists that we do have, and I just want to credit the doctors in Wagga that have lobbied hard and long for many years to get the specialists we do, and for that reason I am extremely grateful, and I imagine many people in this room are grateful because we haven't had to travel for surgery or whatever it may be. So thank you to those people. Look, however, you're right. I mean, it would be good if we became a critical care centre that would attract surgeries. That we could have our specialists being trained here in Wagga. So what's happening is this fantastic training set we've got here in Wagga. People get trained with UNSW or... What's the other one, Joe? No. Notre Dame. Yeah. And they train here, and that's great. We've got them here. They love Wagga. It's fantastic. And then if they want to specialise, at the moment they have to go away to Sydney or to another big city to get their specialisation. And in that time, some of them will not come back again. So why don't we become a critical care centre so that we can actually have the specialists here and train our specialists here, so our resources and our medical staff grow here and we grow our own.
Okay, Andriana Benjamin, I think it's even worse in small country towns like Tumut. I mean, with luck, you might get into a GP in places like Adelong or Yerong Creek. The School of Rural Medicine will have some effect. Migration is obviously an answer, but country people are just relentlessly disadvantaged, aren't they? Especially the poorer they are and the more vulnerable.
Thanks, Genevieve. Look, I've been in health now for 13 years and I have seen a big overhaul. I myself am in allied health. I have a very close relationship, working relationship with all of our GPs in our area of the Snowy Valleys. We are very fortunate to have the hospital that we have at the moment with Wagga Base and also Tumut Hospital, and that's in government that push to deliver those particular facilities. We've got state-of-the-art facilities, and I'm proud to be standing here today and being able to be a NAT as well. To deliver those pieces of infrastructure is fantastic. Now, we do have a shortage of doctors across the Snowy Valleys. As for Wagga, not so much. I know for a fact there is a bit of a waiting period for getting into a doctor, but I think it comes back to housing again, because for the Snowy Valleys, you can't even find a rental property. And if someone like a specialist or a GP is wanting to move over from Sydney or Melbourne or wherever it may be, they can't even find a home to reside in. So how are we going to attract those people to come into our regions when we don't have enough housing for them to move here? So that's one of our major problems. As for our facilities, we've got excellent facilities. We're continuing to push more funding into investing $4.5 billion in recruiting more than 10,100 full-time equivalent staff into our hospitals. But the major thing is people need to move here. People need to have the facilities that's going to prosper for them and their families. So if we don't have enough housing, enough land for that to happen, I think that becomes quite a struggle. And coming from a health background, it's been on the cards for many years. So I think housing is really important. So, and we live in a beautiful part of the world, and why not move here? So, but I think our GPs are getting tired. We need to be able to get GPs into our areas. Specialists, not so bad. I think the specialist side of things is still okay, but there is a crisis in GPs, and I'm hearing it every day. So being on the ground, being in that field for so many years is definitely an eye-opener. But I, myself, if we are elected, I will fight to ensure that we can get more people out in the bush in regional New South Wales to be able to support our communities, because we need those health professionals here on the ground over here, not all in Sydney, and not piling up over there. We need them to come out here. It's really important. So if elected, I will be fighting, because my passion is definitely health, and it has been for more than a decade. So I'll be working very hard to ensure that happens.
Okay, Dr. Jo, on that question of access to services, access to termination is an urgent issue for a lot of women voters, particularly in the Riverina. Aside from the legalities, what is the difference between a vulnerable woman from, say, Lockhart, who can't afford to travel to Sydney for an abortion, and a pregnant woman living in poverty in Mississippi? What's the essential difference there?
Look, access to health services in the regions is an absolute number one priority. And that includes access to pregnancy care, termination care, and so on. I have actually worked with the local health district so that they would establish those services here at the Wagga Base Hospital. In the last 6 months, that has actually happened. And I note in the Sydney Morning Herald last week, there are only 2 public hospitals in this state that provide that service. One is John Hunter and one is here. I agree with you that where services are required, they need to be provided as close to people as possible. And the public system does have a role there, although generally in that case it's looked after by the private. But as we know, in rural and regional areas, so often the private system doesn't deliver, and you need a strong public system. And can I say this goes to the heart of a very key issue, and that is we're only going to solve rural health and the rural health challenge when we have control of our training and our resources. We have got to stop accepting Sydney-based solutions to these issues, which is what we get from the Department of Health. And that is why I have advocated that we need a separate rural health minister and a separate rural health department. You know, we have the capacity in this region. And I think the doctors here would say they already have a critical care centre here, because over the last 20 years they've developed solutions to problems here, not in Sydney, here. That's why the government, on my lobbying, has given us $1 million to establish the Murrumbidgee Health and Knowledge Research Precinct here. It's why the nation is now adopting the Murrumbidgee GP practice model for training. It's why the first rural clinical school was set up here. The solutions are in the regions, and we've got to stop accepting the hand-me-downs from Sydney. We need a regional health department with a standalone regional health minister. Now, I'm not talking about a big bureaucracy. The Department of Regional New South Wales is not a big bureaucracy. It functions as a smallish department that coordinates activities and puts a focus on the issues in the regions, and we need that for regional health. And it needs to tackle the GP shortage, which is killing health in the regions. General practice is in a dire state. And everyone says, well, it's a federal problem. And they don't do anything. And the feds say, well, the states should be looking after it. Well, actually, it's about time they stop passing the buck. And I think a regional health department needs to tackle that head on and get the state and Commonwealth to the table to sort out that general practice issue. We need a strong advocate. We need rural solutions. And number one, of course, is workforce. But I believe our communities have the capacity to deliver those solutions.
Because what I want to get some clarification on is what I think I heard at the beginning, and that is a commitment from you to the provision of abortion services under the public health system in Wagga. And I'm just going to ask you to clarify, we're not simply talking about very early stage medical abortions, we're talking about more complex surgical procedures. Yes?
I have worked with the local health district to make sure that those services are available locally. Now, there are various ways the health district can do that, and they have begun that process, I'm very pleased to say, and they need to continue that process, can I just say. And can I also say, once again, that the rest of regional New South Wales needs to look at that model and think about how they can tackle that.
Karen Foley, are you satisfied with this answer? I mean, abortion remains legal in the Riverina. It can be accessed to a degree through nurse practitioners. Women have access to free and effective reproductive health care early in their pregnancies. Is that resonating with you?
My understanding was that women still had to travel away to get those services.
Okay. Can you provide more detail on that?
That's just what my understanding is of that.
Okay, all right. And I think that's the clarity we were looking for between the difference with early terminations that are done medically and later terminations, which are surgical procedures. Ray Goodlass, this remains a largely conservative electorate. It's still a strongly Catholic city. I think this is the most Catholic electorate in Australia, apparently. Do you think that the majority of the population wants greater access to abortion services?
As far as I can tell, yes.
Okay.
Unequivocally.
Okay. Right.
Answer.
Okay, I'm going to move on now to some of the questions that have been coming.
Do I get to talk about health?
Well, yes. I mean,
Yeah.
you've had the floor, so go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So my understanding as well that there's huge problems in the health service, and the Nurses and Midwives Association has been talking to me about their difficulties with attracting and retraining and retaining staff. Labor's plan is for safe staffing. They want to recruit and retain staff. They will hire 1,200 nurses and 500 paramedics and remove the wages cap. So this has been a great barrier for nurses to attract people here, and they want parity with the other states. Also in the Fresh Start plan is that we will have 29 McGrath breast care nurses, invest 17 million in Kids Helpline.
Can you restrict that specifically to Wagga, please, Karen? Can you tell us what's going to happen here in Wagga? Because I'm not presuming we're getting 29 McGrath nurses in Wagga.
Well, it'll be 29 McGrath nurses across the state,
Yep.
but it will mean that anyone with that needs breast care will have access to it.
So what I'd love to hear is what will happen here in Wagga, not what Labor is promising for the whole of New South Wales.
Well, I guess it's those things are flow-on effects in terms of looking at what they have promised to do and what a difference that will make to people to be able to, because the helpline is a telephone service and anyone can access that.
Okay, all right. Look, thank you for that. I want to go on to some questions that have been coming through from people who are listening online. I've got a question about public education funding from Helen Mundy, who says, could the candidates tell us what they'll do to assist the discrepancy in funding for public schools? Why is the state government funding religious and private schools? Julia, would you like to have a crack at that?
Okay, thank you, Helen, for the question. Look, it is a big question, and it's actually partly federal and partly state. I am a teacher, I am an educator. I'm actually an early childhood educator, and it is to my distress that when I finished Waverley Kindergarten Teachers College in the 80s, that I was at parity with the person sitting next to me, and now that is 25% less just because we chose to be early childhood teachers. Now, that's just ridiculous, and this is with funding, but it also shows the strength of a good union compared to a group of nice ladies who would like to work with young children. So that is something I'd really like to work towards. The funding with public schools and private schools and how that works, that's a very complex issue. And I appreciate the question, Helen. I just don't have the means to answer it.
How about you, Karen Foley? What's your answer on the question of the difference between funding, state government funding for religious and private schools?
I don't really know.
Okay, all right, let's move on. Andriana Benjamin, I've got a question for you from Clive, who says, will you support the progress of voluntary assisted dying legislation?
Thanks, Clive. Thanks, Genevieve. Look, I'm pretty sure that the state government now has got a legislation out for that. I am for it because I see in health, I see a lot go on, and it's an eye-opener. So I am definitely for it, and I understand the people's needs that actually need this to continue, and yes, I am for it.
Okay, obviously it'll be a conscience matter. Dr Joe, what about you? Where do you stand on voluntary assisted dying?
Well, as everyone knows, of course, I voted against the legislation. It's now passed both Houses of Parliament and it's now law, and the implementation period is being worked through in the Act. There was, I think, a 12 to 18-month implementation period which is being worked through. And, of course, it will become law. And, of course, as I say, I obey the laws of the land. And I respect those decisions. And I don't see any problem with that being rolled out. The Health Department has carriage of that, and that will be rolled out. Can I make the important point, though, and I made this during the debate, and I make it again, that people should also have access to good quality palliative care. People should have a genuine choice in this matter. And my concern, and I raised this in the Parliament, I've got to say, people had not thought about this till I raised this, and that is that in the city people have access to palliative care, high quality palliative care, and so for them there's a choice. But in rural areas, particularly outside of Wagga and smaller rural areas, that access to good quality palliative care does not exist. And so what you've actually created is a situation where for rural people the solution is voluntary assisted dying. Now, how fair is that? I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's adequate. And that is why I raised that in the debate. And the government, to its credit, has committed to doubling palliative care funding to the highest record ever in the next 2 years, with a focus on regional and rural. So what I want to see and what I will be pursuing is to make sure that everybody in regional and rural New South Wales has a genuine choice in terms of this issue, and that they have access to high quality palliative care as well as access to voluntary assisted dying.
Okay, I've got a couple more questions which I'll go to from the text line and a couple more comments, and then I will go to questions from the floor. So if you've got one, put your hand up and we'll get a microphone to you. We've got about 10-15 minutes to do that. Ray, this one for you. Considering the recent push for households to install solar panels, what's your view on energy providers now seeking a solar tax from the regulators, that is, charging households for the electricity that they put back into the grid between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. instead of paying them?
Households should be paid for the electricity they produce, and this is a problem because the grid isn't capable of receiving it, and that's what's created this problem. So we need completely to reorganise our electricity grid so that electricity produced from domestic solar panels can be fed into it and people can be paid for what they produce. It's in excess of their own needs. Yes.
Okay. Dr Joe, a question for you from Ben, and it's a long one. It's about the City of Good Sports. Ben says, in recent years, the city's lack of investment in updating some outdated facilities has become ever more apparent. Where Wagga has up-to-date facilities of an adequate age and size, then we are successful in securing top-level matches and large statewide carnivals of note. The touch football and hockey masters recently played at Jubilee Park. a huge economic boost to the city, obviously, with all those visitors coming in. What are your plans to expedite funding and upgrades to facilities like the Wagga cricket ground, which has been largely unchanged for 50 years, or securing land to develop new facilities that are suitable for those large-scale events? And what have you been doing about it during your term?
So, absolutely right, the infrastructure here needs to be upgraded across our sporting facilities. And to be honest, it has been a difficult issue for many clubs to get access to grant funding. And so what I have done I've established assistance for those clubs to make sure that they can access funding, and a number of them have across the electorate. And I have a grants portal set up. I've hosted grants webinars, and I've met with clubs that wanted to have that funding. Now, the cricket club approached me in the middle of last year, and initially they said they had grants in with clubs grant. They expected those grants to come through. They wanted assistance with the council to develop the master plan, which I subsequently followed up with council. But of course, those grants didn't turn out to be successful. And it was a classic situation where government provides grants for community groups, but the community groups struggle to complete the grant applications, to know which grant to apply for and how to get it for their clubs. And so I've made a conscious effort, and I will continue to make a conscious effort, to assist clubs on the ground so that they can be successful in upgrading those facilities, and also making sure that federal and local government work with state to achieve those outcomes.
Okay, let's go to some questions from the floor. Chris here has got the microphone, so put your hand up if you'd like. We've got lots of questions. A couple of people down there. Let's go there first, and let's watch out for that feedback. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
G'day guys, my name's Richard. I'm a small business owner here in Wagga. I've got 2 hospitality businesses and I employ 44 staff, and I have done for the last 4.5 years. Tonight I've heard nothing about small business and I've heard nothing about the economy. So I guess my question to all of the candidates is around payroll tax. We're quite high in New South Wales with our payroll tax. We're currently sitting at 5.45%. Where Victoria to our south in the region is sitting at 1.21%. Victoria does a special rate for regional Victoria. They do a different rate for the city, but even their city rate is a lot lower than New South Wales. There's some big headwinds for small businesses here all across the state. I'd like to know what the candidates think about our stamp duty. And more importantly, I want to know that would you support lowering the payroll tax to below 5%? The second question is, will you commit to no increases in the tax burden to small businesses? And are you open to investigating a regional payroll tax in line with Victoria to ensure that New South Wales is competitive with other states? I've heard a lot of talk tonight about spending on bridges and spending on hospitals, and that's all fantastic. But if you want to spend, you need a strong economy. And if you want a strong economy, you need to support business, because business, private business, small business is the engine room to New South Wales.
Get to the question. Karen, what do you think about a regional payroll tax?
I think that if they can do it in Victoria, then that would be something that we could make a business case for, and you would just need to lobby for that to happen. Okay, Andriana, what about you?
Thanks, Richard, for the question. I myself am a small business owner as well, and I totally understand where you're coming from. It is tough, and I think we've been through more than enough in the last 3 years, and it's hard. Small business is the backbone to regional New South Wales. We need these in our communities to continue. I myself am happy to fight for I'm happy to talk to you in regards to what your concerns are as a business owner. But I understand where you're coming from, and I think we need to be in line with what Victoria is doing as well. Completely agree with you there, and I'm happy to have a chat to you about it and what your concerns are as a small business owner. And we can go from there. But definitely small business is a backbone to our communities. And you guys, we all have been through too much in the last 3 years. So I completely understand. And I'm happy, if we're elected, happy to fight to bring everything in line.
Now, I think we had 2 more hands down there. I'll go to you in the check shirt and then to the bloke next to you and then come up to you. Okay, go ahead.
Just to all the candidates, if you're elected as a state member of Wagga Wagga on the 25th of March, what support and encouragement will you give to farmers who want to take advantage of the beneficial effects of solar panels, such as a 25% increase in fat lamb production to put food on the table of people in Wagga, while at the same time generating electricity for the renewable electricity for the grid.
Okay, Ray, you had a crack at solar a minute ago. I'm going to go to Dr. Joe on this. Go ahead.
Can I just first of all come back to the payroll tax? Richard, thanks for
very briefly.
I campaigned on that at the last election. I'm campaigning on this. There should be a regional payroll tax less than 5%. I've raised it in the Parliament. I raised it with the Treasurer. The problem is getting the buy-in from the other parties in the Parliament. We need to keep that fight going. There's definitely got to be a special regional payroll tax to compete with Victoria.
Okay, on to the solar energy, please.
So, I think that there's clearly a place for solar developments on farmland, but we need to be very clear about the planning approval guidelines for that. And there are certainly parts of this state where I think they're very suitable, but I have real concerns about solar developments on prime agricultural land. I think the contentions that are made about the productivity of sheep farming under solar panels where there's already prime agricultural land are not supported by evidence. I've seen the Clean Energy Council's glossy brochure, and they talk about sheep production. It's an honours student study in Oregon some years ago. The fact of the matter is that when you've already got prime agricultural land, putting solar panels on it risks the land. Now, that's the feedback that I've had from farmers, and my position is we need to check that out. And as a result of my advocacy, we have now got much more stringent planning guidelines that will mean that there should be community consultation and there will be account taken of prime agricultural land, because I do think there is a land use conflict issue here. Now, I have spoken out in support of renewable energy on countless occasions and will continue to do so. But the issue around the HumeLink, transmission lines, and the proliferation of solar factories on prime agricultural land is an important one. Because in the cities, there's a view that no one lives out here. We are in the middle of the greatest electricity transformation in 100 years. We are going from a system in which coal will get generated from the coast and just distributed out to one in which there will be distributed generation from wind and solar farms, largely west of the Divide. That's going to need tens of thousands of transmission lines, and it will need vast amounts of solar energy. Now, those are not being built in areas where there aren't communities. There are people out here that they affect. And I spoke on this at the Sydney Institute, a well-known progressive institute in terms of climate activism, because they too were concerned that if we are going to make this change in electricity generation and create a renewable economy, then we do need to consider the effects on people where we're putting transmission lines and where we are putting renewable infrastructure.
Okay, I'm going to pull you up there because I can see Ray is busting to have a say, and I'm going to take two more questions after this because we're running very close to time. Ray, go ahead.
Well, the short answer to the gentleman's question was, yes, I would support coexisting solar panels on farms where you can do something else at the same time, such as sheep farming, if the panels are high enough and ranked appropriately, because that way you really are, having your cake and eating it. And it is possible. There's been a project up Parks Way that is proving to be very successful, and one that's near Wagga on the planning stages. And it's a win-win situation if it's done properly. I'm also very wary when people throw around expressions like prime farming land, because I wonder sometimes if that land really is prime farming land. It's very easy to say it is, but is it really?
That's a tough question to be asking in this room. I'll say that as a sixth-generation farmer myself. Okay, now two more questions. We've got one down there, and then I think we had, the lady in the middle row that I'm looking at. So go ahead. Yep.
Yeah, g'day. I'm an advocate for the Wagga Wagga airport. I've attracted numerous airlines coming to Wagga. Obviously, the airport is a gateway to the Riverina. And the often feedback I get, and one in particular is Bonza Airlines, is that they won't invest in Wagga or the Riverina because simply the terminal is not of capacity to them, and that the runway cannot facilitate their aircraft. Dr. Joe McGurr, what are you going to do in order to resolve these problems? Obviously, there is a number of problems revolving around the airport, both at state and federal levels. Can you, open up about that?
Yeah, I'm actually going to go to Julia Ham on this first. Julia, go for that.
Thanks for the question. Can you hear me?
No, you have to go to the... Yep.
Thanks for the question. Look, that's been an ongoing question for a long, long time, and I think your question is something that I would advocate very, very strongly for, because I used to fly in and out of that airport a lot. That was very much part of it. But what I can say as a Liberal government is that we do have a strong economic growth plan, and we need to get that airport into that plan, because, we're just growing so quickly, and if we don't have a decent airport, it's really holding us back.
Yeah, but Julia, I'm just going to repeat a text that we've received saying you and Adriana are supporting a government that's been in for more than 10 years. And
Absolutely.
This text, and Natalie says, in that time the roads are worse, we've got beautiful hospitals but no staff. Surely the Liberal state government has had ample time to fix the Wagga airport.
Well, and also part of I think it's quite a federal problem, part of it as well, so which is true. Which is, I'm not quite sure on the jurisdiction, sorry about that. But the Liberal government, yes, we've worked very hard on our infrastructure, and we can see, I listed what we have delivered. However, we can't do, what I do like about the Perrottet government is that they do have a budget, they do have a plan, and they will make sure we get through our infrastructure one at a time. We need to make a lot of noise. We need to have a strong voice in Parliament, but we also need a Premier that is in charge of our money, that can make sure that we are still viable, we're still AAA credit rating, and that is for something for the coalition government to be extremely proud of, so that when people do come about the airport, that we are able to help if that's what we're lobbying for.
Okay, so airport maybe straight after the Gobba Bridge. Okay, Dr Joe, what's your response on the airport?
Look, it's a good question. The key issue, as I understand it, is that airport is leased to Wagga City Council by the Commonwealth. And it's one of very few airports in this state. Most of them are owned by councils, and therefore the councils invest in them. Wagga City Council, I think the lease is up in 2 years' time, and they're still renegotiating with the Commonwealth. I've raised this with our federal member, and I'll continue to raise it with our federal member. Because there's no question that airport needs to be improved. Now, I understand that there are now requirements for full-body scanners to go in. So there's one arm of the federal government requiring that. Well, where are we going to put those in the airport at the moment? I mean, people have to queue outside. Poor old Rex will be queuing on the footpath. But the key issue, as I understand it, is that Commonwealth will not either give a long-term lease to the council or hand over the airport to the council. That's the key area we need to work on. And I commit to working on that with the Commonwealth Government, but at the end of the day, that's where the roadblock is that I see.
Okay, we're going to have one last question. This lady here. Yep, we'll get the microphone to you.
For the past 4 years, we've been cursed by the large-scale solar energy transition. And I believe the solar wind transition is a fake green grift and Ponzi scheme that has no benefits whatsoever to Australia. And we should be having reliable, efficient Australian energy that is not making us reliant on the Chinese government.
Okay, I'm going to pull you up there and ask you to get to the point of the question. What's your question to the candidates specifically for this election?
In New South Wales, there's a Modern Slavery Act, a New South Wales Parliament Modern Slavery Act, and all government bodies and councils have a duty not to host, procure or have a power purchase agreement with any solar wind developments based on...
What is your question for the candidates as it relates to this election and this seat?
Based on modern slavery. So I would like to know how you are going to support the solar wind industry when you have to ensure that none of it will be based on modern slavery components.
Okay, is that a concern, Joe McGurr? Have you considered modern slavery as part of your feelings about the solar energy process?
Actually, it is a concern.
Okay, good.
I'm the deputy chair of the Modern Slavery Committee that was established after the Modern Slavery Act by Parliament. And we've been briefed on a couple of occasions by the Modern Slavery Commissioner, who's been appointed in the last 6 months, James Cocaine, and he has written extensively on this issue, and there's no question that we need to examine supply chains and for a range of products coming out of a range of countries. So I'm not going to point the finger necessarily at one, but we need to be examining supply chains because modern slavery is definitely part of that. And there have been concerns raised about solar panels, and that is certainly something that I think needs to be looked at. Fortunately, can I say, with cooperation from all parties in the Parliament, New South Wales is leading Australia in terms of action on this, and I'm very pleased about that. So I think we do have a mechanism to review that.
Okay. It's 6:53. I did say that would be the last question, but I know the Ratepayers Association is here, so I'm just going to do you a favour. This is the absolute last one because we are so close to the end. Go for it.
Thank you very much. Chris Roach from the Wagga Residents Ratepayers Association. Two-part question. Will you, as a successful candidate, advocate to the federal government in support of the major projects within our region that do need federal approval? Second part is, if the state government can spend billions on 3 stadiums in New South Wales, in Sydney, why can't they spend billions on what's going to become the biggest industrial hub in southern New South Wales?
Okay, Andriana, take that on first.
Thanks for the question. Look, I think it's a federal issue there, and I am more than happy to work with Michael McCormack, our federal member, to make something work. There's been no action on it, right? So I'm happy to work with him and my other colleagues in the Nationals Party, Wes Fang, to actually get things going. I think you've got a point, and I think it's been spoken about for too long, and I'm more than happy to work alongside Michael McCormack and try to get things moving as soon as possible. Okay, we did touch on these in a question you asked, you answered a few moments ago, Dr. Joe, so I'm actually going to go on to Karen Foley for the last word on this.
So the answer is yes. I think that there definitely needs better collaboration between local, state and federal government, and again, based on need. So looking at needs, and yes, of course we would advocate to have money spent here. Okay, this has been a debate that has had an extraordinarily wide range of topics. Thank you all for that. I do apologise if there are topics that I didn't get to. We've had a number of messages coming through, some that were more comments than questions perhaps. But I think you've got a really good sense of where the candidates stand on some key issues and also how they respond when they're put under some time pressure and perhaps thrown questions they weren't necessarily expecting. So please thank Andriana Benjamin, Dr. Joe McGurr, Karen Foley, Julia Ham and Ray Goodlass.
Might want to stay, Genevieve, and I've got the easiest job of the night to thank everyone, but I really wanted to thank, on behalf of Committee for Wagga and the board, the wonderful region media who have done this for us tonight and partnered with us, in particular Chris Rowe and Genevieve Jacobs. Wow, Genevieve, where were you in the federal government debate between ScoMo and Albo? We needed you then. So thank you very much for your professionalism tonight. And we do have a little appreciation token, so thank you. I also wanted to thank our very own Adam Drummond for all his work and hard work. So thank you, Adam. Never misses a camera opportunity. But also the wonderful hard-working team behind Committee for Wagga. Scott Sambrook, who's here tonight. Thank you, Scott. Sophie Uden and Michelle Ford for all their work. And also, we do have a token of appreciation for Chris Rowe, the editor of Region Media. So thank you. Once again, on behalf of Committee for Wagga, thank you very much to the candidates. Good luck in the upcoming election, and thank you to everyone that joined us online. Thank you.